Around 3400 BC, in the city of Uruk in southern Mesopotamia, a temple administrator sat down with a wet clay tablet, not to write a poem, not to record a law, not to leave a message for the future. He was trying to remember how many sheep were owed to the temple. Nobody in that room was trying to invent writing. They were trying to solve a much smaller, much more boring problem. Too many transactions, not enough memory. And the system they built to fix it, a set of scratched symbols pressed into wet clay, became the single most consequential invention in the history of human thought. Every book, every contract, every text message on Earth traces back to a Sumerian accountant trying not to lose track of sheep. So how did humans get from counting livestock to writing everything down? Mesopotamian cities were growing fast. Thousands of people, temples running large-scale grain storage and livestock trade, and a growing merchant class making deals that stretched across weeks and months. Human memory doesn't scale. You can remember what one person owes you. You cannot reliably remember what 300 people owe you, for how long, and in what quantity. The earliest solution wasn't writing at all. It was small clay tokens, a cone shape for a measure of grain, a sphere for a unit of oil, a disc for a flock of sheep. Archaeologists have found these tokens at sites across the Near East dating back over 9,000 years. A trader sealed a handful of tokens inside a hollow clay ball as a receipt, and the deal was recorded, not in language, but in shape and count. The breakthrough came when someone realized you didn't need to seal the tokens inside the ball at all. You could just press them into the wet clay surface on the outside, leaving an impression, and skip the tokens entirely. That impression, a mark standing in for an object, is the first proto-writing. Not letters, not sounds, just symbols that meant this many of that thing. By around 3400 to 3200 BC, Sumerian scribes in Uruk had expanded this into a real system. Hundreds of distinct symbols pressed into clay with a cut reed stylus, each representing a specific object, a specific quantity, or a specific person's name. Historians call this cuneiform, from the Latin for wedge-shaped. The earliest tablets weren't literature, they were spreadsheets, beer rations, grain deliveries, temple inventories. The most mundane administrative record-keeping imaginable, and it changed the trajectory of the species. Cuneiform started as pictographs, symbols that looked roughly like the thing they represented. A drawing of a jar meant jar. A drawing of a head with a bowl next to it meant to eat. But pictographs have an obvious ceiling. You can draw a sheep, but you cannot easily draw yesterday or belongs to or before. The fix was a conceptual leap almost as important as writing itself. Scribes began using symbols not for what they showed, but for how they sounded. A symbol that looked like a reed, pronounced roughly T, could now also represent the unrelated word life. This is called the rebus principle, and it's the same trick a child uses when they draw an eye, a heart, and the sea to spell out "I love the sea." Once symbols could represent sounds instead of just objects, scribes could write down anything a person could say: names, feelings, instructions, stories. Language itself became recordable, not just inventories. Writing didn't stay Sumerian for long. Around 3200 BC, largely independently, Egyptian scribes developed hieroglyphics, a system that also mixed pictorial and phonetic symbols, but grew out of Egypt's own administrative and religious needs rather than direct copying from Mesopotamia. Two civilizations, roughly the same problem, roughly the same era, arriving at strikingly similar solutions without ever meeting. From there, writing systems multiplied and diversified with astonishing speed on a historical timescale. The Indus Valley Civilization developed its own still undeciphered script by around 2600 BC. Chinese writing emerged independently by at least 1200 BC, carved into oracle bones used for royal divination. Questions to ancestors, quite literally burned and cracked open for an answer. Mesoamerican civilizations, isolated from every one of these traditions by an ocean, developed their own writing systems centuries later, arriving at the same fundamental insight with zero contact with the old world. That sound and meaning could be captured in a mark. Cuneiform itself kept evolving for close to 3,000 years. And it wasn't even the language that lasted, the writing system was. Cuneiform survived multiple total language changes on its way to obsolescence, Get Used to write Sumerian and later Akkadian, and eventually several other completely unrelated languages of the ancient Near East, because it turned out a script and the language it records are two separable things. A symbol set could migrate to a whole new tongue and simply be retaught. The real compression came around 1050 BC on the eastern Mediterranean coast with the Phoenicians. Phoenician traders needed something Sumerian cuneiform never quite delivered. A writing system simple enough that a merchant, not just a professionally trained scribe, could learn it in weeks rather than years. They stripped writing down to a genuine breakthrough. An alphabet of just 22 symbols, each representing a single consonant sound, no pictographs, no hundreds of specialized signs to memorize. That alphabet spread along Phoenician trade routes across the Mediterranean, and the Greeks adopted it. Adding something the Phoenician system lacked, symbols for vowels, producing the first true alphabet in the modern sense, one where every sound in a spoken word, consonant and vowel alike, had its own written symbol. From Greek, the thread runs directly to Latin, and from Latin to the alphabet you're reading these words in right now. Every letter on this screen is a distant descendant of a Phoenician trader's shorthand, which itself descended from Egyptian hieroglyphics, which shares a common ancestor problem with a Sumerian accountant's clay tokens for counting sheep. Trace the whole arc back, and writing wasn't really invented, at least not the way we imagine invention. One brilliant person, one flash of insight. It accumulated. A temple administrator needed to track grain and forgot to invent a philosophy. A scribe noticed a symbol could represent a sound instead of an object, without meaning to invent literature. A Phoenician trader wanted something quicker to teach his employees, without meaning to hand the alphabet to half the planet. The tool that would eventually record every law, every religion, every scientific discovery, and every letter you've ever written began as a way to make sure nobody walked off owing more sheep than they actually owed.